So let's learn how to make computer graphics using a programming language called Processing.js. We don't need to install any additional software. We can do this all in our web browser. So let's start by going to openprocessing.org, and here we can make a new program. In processing, they call that a sketch. So they give us some example code here for us. We can see it running at the top, and then down here is the code that we can start editing. So what are we looking at here? We have two functions, setup and draw, and you can see pairs of curly braces that contain blocks of code. We also have what are called function calls. These are names followed by parentheses, and the parentheses contain some parameters which are separated by commas, and then there's a semicolon at the end. There are a few other things here, but you can learn about those later. Let's try drawing some things of our own. I'm going to start by deleting the sample code that was provided for us, and I'm also going to set up the color mode. I'm not going to explain the details of what this means right now, but you'll just have to trust me that setting up the color mode in this way will make things a bit nicer to work with later on. So let's draw something simple, maybe an ellipse. For an ellipse, we have to give it 4 numbers. First of all, 2 numbers for the position of the center of the ellipse, and lastly, the width and height of the ellipse. I'm just going to use random numbers. So here, random numbers between 0 and 250. So when we run this, we can see something else interesting about processing, that it keeps running our draw function over and over again, and it continues to draw on top of what's already there. Let's add some color next. We can do this with the fill function. Fill takes 3 numbers. The first is between 0 and 360, and it's the hue, which tells processing which color to use. The second number is called saturation. It's between 0 and 100, and that tells how much gray versus how much color to mix in. And the last number is called brightness. That's also between 0 and 100, and 0 here means black, and 100 means the brightest color. So here I'm just using random again for all 3 of these. Oh yeah, and you have to put this before the shape that you're drawing. So here we put fill before the ellipse. So when we run this, we can see random ellipses with random colors. So if you haven't already, why don't you go to openprocessing.org and try this out yourself? And you can play around with this too. For example, you could take some of these random numbers and replace them with non-random numbers, just a normal number. I'm going to do that here and change my saturation and brightness to just be constant numbers instead of random all the time. So why don't you go give that a try, and when you're done playing around, come back and I'll show you a few more things. Did you go try it yet? Do it. Come on, go do it. So here's something else we can do. We can save numbers into what's called a variable, and then we can reuse it multiple times in the rest of our draw function. So let's take a random number and put it in a variable called size, and then we'll use that size both for the width and the height of the ellipse. And that way we'll get perfect circles, but we'll still have a random size. We just won't have a different random height and width. Great. So I think you're ready for something more advanced. Let's use an if statement, and we can use this to conditionally execute code. So let me show what that means. I'm going to say if the value in the size variable is less than 35, then run this code, which changes the color to a shade of gray. Otherwise, don't do anything. So if we run this now, we still have randomly sized circles, but the ones whose size is less than 35 are colored gray, and the ones who aren't are still colored with a random color like they were before. We can also initialize variables in our setup method. So here I'm going to make x and y for the center of our ellipse. So that behaves as expected. But the reason we might want to do this is that now in our draw method, we can change those variables. So I'm going to give x a new value, which is its old value plus 1. And the same thing for y. So every time we draw, it's going to increase the x and y values for next time. And when we run this, we can see that each ellipse is drawn a little bit farther down and to the right from the previous one. So I'm going to do the same thing for size and have it increase over time. So now, something that's commonly done is to use an if statement to check when a value that we're changing gets too big or too small, or we could use any other condition. But in this case, I want to check if x gets too large, if the center goes off the edge of the screen, then I want to reset it back to 0. And I'll do the same thing for y. If it gets too big, we'll reset it back to 0. And for size, if the size gets too large, let's just reset it to a random number. So now when we run it, after a certain size, it'll reset to a smaller size. And when it gets to the bottom right, it will reset back to the top left. And you're probably familiar with this kind of effect from games where if you move off the side, you'll wrap around to the other side of the screen. So that is plenty of ellipses for the time being. Let's draw something else. We can draw rectangles with the rect function. Looks like this. And we can also draw lines with the line function. But when we draw lines, there is no shape to fill, so we can't change the color with fill. Instead, we want to change the color of the line, which is called the stroke color. And you can also change the stroke color when you draw rectangles and ellipses. That'll just be the color of the border. So not much to see here, but that's how you draw a line. So with that, hopefully you have enough to get started playing around with Processing.js and hopefully make something cool. Let me show you one more thing about where you can go to find more information about Processing.js and some of the other functions you can use in your programs. So if you simply do a search for Processing.js documentation, you will get a link to the reference website. And here on this page is a list of all the different functions that you can use in your sketches. We've used a few of these already, like rect, line, ellipse, stroke, fill, background. I think those are the most of the ones we've used. So you can see there's a lot more here. In particular, you can do stuff with the mouse cursor. There's even 3D graphics stuff you can do if you want to read more about it. So that's it for the intro. I hope that's enough to get you started. Here are a few examples of sketches that I've made at openprocessing.org to give you a few ideas. And I'd love to see what you come up with, or hear if you have any questions or problems making your own sketches. You can find me on Twitter or at buildsomethingawesome.org. So thanks for watching. Have fun.